Welcome to another episode on our channel. So I finally had a chance to get my last World War I figure created, and I wanted to create an officer from Italy because they were one of the primary players on the Allied side. It was hard to figure out how to make him, but I finally had things come together, looking at a lot of photographs online to see, what a soldier officer might look like. I did notice that they did typically have the leather boots and the leather gaiters, and they had a more of a subdued green uniform. The hat, I was able to make two versions of the hat that I saw in photographs, one like this and one like this. This is probably the more common version, maybe a little bit taller, more like a French hat, but it's hard to find French hats. So I took a German hat and took away the part that kind of wraps around it where you can undo it and bring it down over your ears. Took that part away. And I think it turned out fairly nicely. I'm going to show this hat on this figure later on when we do close-ups of the head. And then I'll show you not just this close-up, but this hat close-up, and then this hat with goggles on, because I wanted to make everything slightly different. Didn't want everybody to have the same types of things. So goggles, I haven't used on anyone, so I thought I would use that on the Italian soldier. So here he is. So what we'll do is we'll step back and we'll do some close-ups from here, from the feet, all the way up to the top of the head. Then we'll do some side-to-side shots and then get some close-ups of the head sculpt side to side with this hat on. Then we'll do side to side close up with this hat on and then with the goggles. And then we'll bring all the players back out so you can see the Central Powers as well as the Allied powers. So we'll be right back. We'll set up for, we're starting here all the way up to the top of the head. We'll be right back. So here is our Italian officer from World War I. He has leather boots. He's got the shoes themselves and the leather gaiters over the shoes. And then as we move up, we'll see his uniform come into play. And they had a more subdued green uniform. And then kind of a brown, light brown, dark brown holster, belt, binoculars, and so forth. Stars on the collar. And then the crest on his hat. And this was one of the hats that I did see in terms of my research on the internet for Italian soldiers with the infantry symbol there on the hat. So we'll pause, do some side-to-side shots. We'll be right back. We are back and we'll go side to side here, starting on the side with the binocular case. And the binoculars around his neck. And of course the holster, the belt. And the stars on his collar, the emblem up here on his hat. So we'll pause now and get a close-up of his face. So we're going to do this several times with the two different hats. I think this is probably the more formal hat that was worn by officers. And I wanted to make him infantry, so you can see the two rifles there. Anyway, we'll also take a look at the alternate hat. So here is the alternate hat. I'm not sure which one I like better. They're They're different, but likable, both of them. But we'll pause now and put the goggles on this one. So here is an alternate view of him with the goggles on. I actually like the goggles because they're so different from the other soldiers I've made. And there you go. We are back, and I wanted to show you the entire World War collection one last time. Here's the Italiano officer you saw just a second ago. So this side are the individuals or the countries representing the Allied side, and this side is the Central Power side. This all started between two countries, Austria-Hungary and Serbia. And it actually, the precipitant was an outside player. It was a person by the name of Gavrilo Princip, who is fighting not for the Serbian government, but for Slav unification. So it's pretty much known by all accounts that this was not related to the government of Serbia. Number one, Gavrilo said he's fighting for Slav unification. Number two, Austria-Hungary did an investigation and they didn't find direct ties to Serbia. But there were a lot of conflicts between these two countries. And it was like an unrelated straw that broke the camel's back. They just were itching to fight. And Austria-Hungary sent a bunch of concessions to Serbia, and they actually agreed to quite a few of the majority of those concessions. Seemed fair to Germany, but they were letting Austria-Hungary decide, and they said not enough. And they just wanted to know if Germany would back them, and they gave them full assurance they would. And so they declared war and back and forth. Russia agreed to support Serbia. France entered in on this side. And then Germany invaded a neutral country, Belgium, to get into a position to help Austria-Hungary. And the United Kingdom had a treaty with Belgium, so they entered in on the Allied side. So by the time you got done, there were more countries than these countries represented, but the Central Powers were primarily Austria-Hungary, Germany, Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. On the Allied side was Serbia, Russia, France, United Kingdom. Japan entered fairly early, and then Italy and the United States. The United States entered towards the end of the war, 1917, I'm sorry, 1917. Russia exited in 1918 due to the Bolshevik Revolution. So these are the Allied powers, and these are the Central Powers. Regardless of who the players were, there were 40 million estimated casualties, representing injuries and deaths. They estimated in terms of military personnel between 9 and 11 million losses, and on the civilian side between 6 and 13 million losses, whether it was due to disease, hunger, starvation, that is, or genocide. Lots of losses. On the central side, the country taking the most losses was Germany, followed by Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. On this side, the country taking the most losses was Russia, followed by France, then England, then Italy, then Serbia, United States. This is the lesser number with Japan, but a lot of losses, a lot of casualties. And it is reported that the Allied side lost more individuals than the Central Power side, even though these forces, the Central Powers, lost the war. But that's another thing. We don't, there's debate about when the war actually literally ended. There was the armistice on November 11th at 11 a.m. in 1918. But an armistice is just a ceasefire, and that lasted for 36 days, and it was renewed 4 times. So even though some people trace the end of the war to 1918, others trace the end of the war to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. But the United States didn't officially end the war with that treaty. It was in 1921. And the last player, Ottoman Empire, it was the Treaty of Lausanne that was signed in 1923, when all fighting, I guess, ceased. So there is debate as to when the war ended. Even with the armistice, there was confusion or willful negligence. I don't know how to term it, but General John Pershing was actually against the armistice from the United States. He did call a ceasefire at 11 a.m., but he had encouraged a lot of people to fight up until then. And of course, some fights did go on past that time limit. Apparently, there were 11,000 casualties on the Western Front, which was more than the losses taken on D-Day. And in fact, of the 11,000 fatalities, 3,500 were American soldiers. And he was called to a congressional committee to explain why there were so many losses on that day where an armistice was called. So 40 million casualties, some crazy deaths, even with the armistice. And, all starting with 2 countries, it became truly a world war. It is sad that these things happen. Very sad. Especially when it really wasn't an aggressive act to start a war. It was some outside player that was kind of used as an excuse for a world war, I guess, in the end. So anyway, what we'll do is we'll pan across so you can get some close-ups of all these figures. It took me a while to get everyone I wanted on the table, and there are quite a few folks here, but I'm very happy with the outcome. So we'll focus on faces, or maybe half of the body, and just pan across so you can see everyone. I hope in the end you'll enjoy what you've seen, and if so, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. In the meantime, I will say goodbye, but please enjoy the view that you get to see with these soldiers. We'll be right back. Okay, here we go. United States, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, France, Russia, Serbia, Allied powers, now Central powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria.